Hello and welcome back to your favorite podcast. This is Becoming Relentless, and I'm your host, Eleanor McCabe, IFBB Bikini Pro and Team Mahaley Coach, and I'm joined by my lovely co-hosts,
Cecily Wesh, Team Haley Coach.
And Danielle Kissenberger, Team Haley Coach.
And today we have our special guest still here. You guys are welcome. I know you wanted more. This is Alexa.
Hello.
She was on our last podcast, but she's here again and she's going to bless us with some more knowledge. This topic I'm not super familiar with. I guess I don't have a whole lot to go off of, so I'm just going to let you take the floor. What are we talking about today?
Oof.
She's like, yeah. Thanks, Noah.
We're going to talk about some masculine, feminine dynamics in fitness.
I love that. This is dope.
Yeah.
And I think just before we dive in, I just want to talk about a couple of different things just to hopefully cover the ground rules or just basics of it. When we talk about masculine and feminine, I don't want to make, that doesn't mean like man and woman.
Not like gendered.
No, it's not gendered. Like people usually have like a core energy, like they're both within us. Like both of us have masculine and feminine energies inside of us, but they aren't, like gender specific. So you can identify as female and have a masculine core. Like that's not an issue at all. And also if you don't like the terminology masculine and feminine, you can use like solar and lunar or like yin and yang. So they're again just not gender specific. And the other piece I would like to just say as a preface is that any of these concepts that you hear in like, I guess like the spirituality space, they're all just metaphors. They're all just tools. Whatever resonates with you, amazing, keep it, work with it. Anything that doesn't, like chakras or like kosha bodies or masculine, feminine dynamics, inner child, whatever you want to call it, whatever resonates with you, keep it. And if it doesn't work, then cool, find a different one. So yeah, these aren't like set in stone, like these things exist and rule your life. It's just like, hey, these are commonalities in nature and the world, and we're just going to kind of dive into them a little bit more today.
Think about it, ponder it.
Yeah, just be open, be curious.
I'm excited.
Yeah. So I guess I'll start, with the definition. So when we talk about masculine and feminine, we're going to kind of talk about them in unison because they do complement each other. Like if they're part of the yin and yang circle, you have like the white side and you have the black side, and they both have a little bit within each of them. So if we're talking about masculine, I'm going to use a analogy here. It's like a water bottle, for example. It's the masculine is the container. It's what holds the water. And then in the feminine sense, it would be the water that is within the masculine container. So we always have these. It's very common to see in nature. You see it in like rivers, riverbanks. Riverbanks is the masculine and the water is the feminine. So it's usually just like a container and then the creative energy within that container that balance each other out. So it's
Yeah.
So is the masculine always the container in that analogy?
Yes. So it'll always be kind of like what holds the energy within, if that makes sense. So it is its own energy, but it's more like observational, kind of like sitting back. I think the best way to think about it is like trust and boundaries. Those are the two pieces that are very important, and also like protection in that sense. So it's just like this like big hug almost for whatever you're hugging within. And then feminine will always be this like creative, wild, flowing, powerful energy within. And I think that's really interesting too, because a lot of people in today's society think like, oh, like feminine, let's just like rainbows and butterflies and pink. That's like all it is. And it's like, no. Like it is the full spectrum of everything. It can be destructive. It can be very like powerful. It also can be very gentle. It's not like it's wrong in that sense. But I think I wanted to bring it up today because I've noticed this for myself the more that like I kind of dive into psychology and more of the, I guess, like fundamentals of nature, if you will, that there are like these idealistic masculine and feminine energies, and then there are the more like wounded masculine and feminine energies. And the more that I look into them, the more that I see that they actually come up a lot in my clients. And when I look on social media and people, and it's like, oh, there's actually like a decent amount of this. And I don't think maybe if we like kind of like phrase it this way, people can like start to see like, oh, maybe it doesn't have to be this way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's very clear to understand in the way that you're presenting it. Yeah.
That's what I like about it too. It feels very like accessible for people to understand. Like there is like a picture, I think, of what people have of both of them, and I think that typically is like the more like wounded state of things. Yeah. It's like, oh, like masculine, that's very like driven and direction focused and like aggressive, and it's like okay, like not all the time, It's like a very like healthy masculine is like it's not like controlling. It's not like possessive. It's not abusive or aggressive for some people. And I think that's something that I see in bodybuilding a decent amount, actually, is like a wounded masculine paradigm, if you will. So it's like everything is controlled to a T, you know, and it's like there does need to be a certain element of that. Absolutely. I'm not saying to take like the whole container away, but it's like when it's so constricting that there's nothing, like there cannot be anything outside of it, then there is imbalance in some senses. And then also, I think one of the things that maybe everyone in this room can relate to on some level is like the inner tyrant or like the inner critic. That's also like a symptom, I guess, of the wounded masculine. It's like when it becomes like an abusive voice in your head, it's like, okay, like that's not yours. And that's not, you don't choose to have that. That's something that just like kind of like came into you in some level. And it's almost like glorified in some way. You know, it's like if you can be like, oh, like I'm not hardcore enough and like I need to like bully myself into doing this, and it's like I don't train hard enough, I'm not like a winner, I'm a loser, I'm all of these things. And it's like, okay, like how is that helping you though? Like how is that voice actually helping you? Like what is it, like what are you protecting, what are you running away from, where did this come from, does it make you feel good, you know? So I'm curious the thoughts on that.
I like that. Yeah.
I think we all like resonated with that too.
Yeah.
As a bodybuilders and competitors and like in prep, I think anyone can relate to that component.
How would you go about like, so let's say, so I'll just use myself for an example. I feel like I do get very into my like masculine, especially in prep, because I have to have things so tightly controlled for me to feel like I am achieving the prep I want to achieve, to like check off all my boxes. That does make me feel good knowing at the end of the day I didn't leave anything to chance. But if I want to move away from feeling like I'm stuck in masculine and integrate feminine, how would I do that without like crossing my protocols? Is there like, how am I thinking about it?
Yeah, I
like,
think one thing that I'll just kind of like, I guess like correct a little bit is I think when a lot of people like kind of get into this and they're like, oh, I'm so on my masculine, they usually mean that they're like kind of in their wounded masculine a little bit. So I think like finding out like what that healthy balance looks like, because it's like very understanding the masculine. It's like, oh, you know, like I see that you have all of these things going on in you, like all of these emotions, all of these experiences, like all of this power. Like I see it, I understand it, and like I can hold it for you. So it's like I know that you have all of these things that you want to do, and like that's completely great, and I want that for you. But like we need to get this done now. So it's like almost like this compassionate, understanding, empathetic voice to an extent.
Yeah.
So I think like finding that for yourself would be a helpful place to start, because if you don't have like a container, like you can't hold the feminine, you know, you can't like integrate it. And I think that's where I went wrong, is like I had that same thought. It's like, oh, I'm just in my masculine, driven, working all the time, just like, you know, burning myself into the ground, like internally, externally, all over the place. And I'm like, okay, I just need to like be more free flowing. And then you try that and it's like, oh, well now I'm so free flowing that like I don't have anything to like hold me, you know, like there is like no more structure left.
A little lost.
Yeah, just like a little like all over the place. It's like, oh, just like just very like whimsical. It's like, oh, I probably should get this done today, and then it's like 12 or like 1 in the morning and I'm like, oh, rip.
Oh my gosh, that is hilarious.
And sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so for people who are, maybe this is their first time really diving into it, how do they identify where they're at? Like how would you identify wounded masculine, wounded feminine versus like the more healthy versions? Yeah.
So I think what I said earlier, as far as like, how controlling are you? You know, and like being honest with that question, not based on anyone else's standards, not like your favorite influencers, you know, like hardcore quotes that everyone likes.
Wake up
at
4 a.m.
Yeah, no days off, rest days are for losers, whatever you want to say. So like, how controlling are you, and like how does that influence your life? Like, are there negative consequences to that? And then also with the inner critic, like this is probably like the biggest thing that I see in my athletes that I'm always trying to like pull out of them. It's like, we don't need to be this hard on ourselves, because at some point, like, yes, like being honest and being like, hey, you know, like I could be better. I recognize this. I can see where I want to go. But then like bullying yourself so much that it's almost like you can't do anything with it. It just like bullies you into submission. So it's like this inner tyrant that doesn't let you get things done. And that ends up doing like more harm than good, when it's like, oh, that voice should inspire you to want to get better.
Yeah, this is something I constantly tell my athletes, and I'm pretty sure I've said this on one of the podcasts, but it's like pressure, yes, it is a privilege, but it shouldn't be something that cripples you.
Yeah.
Like it should be something that you can like work around, and it motivates you, it inspires you to do better, but doesn't tear you down.
I will say too, and I want to ask you this question. Do you feel like when we first started being friends, like I was super
Yes.
in my masculine,
Oh, 100%.
the like,
I was gonna say toxic masculine.
but I was
masculine.
That's why I was having like, yeah, I really was. And I would go back into that phase during like, I went back to that into my nationals prep. And I realized, that's when I realized like, that I needed to find my balance. You helped me so much, dude. Yeah. I was definitely in that place of, it was very toxic.
Yeah, no, me too. Like I was definitely there like last year. And I think for me, it got like so aggressive that I was like, for me, I was pushing everything like so hard that it's like my body broke, you know? It's like, it just like, it's like, we're not doing this anymore. Like you need to find something different. It was like injuries kept coming up. I kept getting sick. I could not train for the life of me anymore. And it's like this whole identity of what I had to like go, you know, it's like I needed to reframe it. And it's extremely difficult, especially like in the culture that we have. There's a lot of shame around, you know, like if you don't train hard enough, if you do take days off of the gym, if you do burn out of bodybuilding at some point, have a bad reverse, like there are a lot of people that will trash you for that. And I think having that experience for myself, like I used to be one of those people. It's like, oh, you burned out of bodybuilding because you're not tough enough, you know? And yeah, it's like I had that, and it's humbling experience to have it happen to you. And it's like, you know, I can have compassion for you. Like I understand that we're doing a really difficult thing and that it's not always going to be really easy. And it's like, I just wish that there was like ways that we could like incorporate both of these pieces so there isn't burnout and that there isn't this just like one way of doing things where it's like we need to like shame you into like pushing yourself into the ground so hard.
I think that also like can resonate with people with eating disorders because it's either like this or that. Like you either go all in and eat all, like you binge eat, or you don't have it at all. And like if you can have that balance of like, oh, I'll have like 2 bites of ice cream and be okay with like putting it away and like not even thinking about it the rest of the day, like that's where you want to be. Like a lot of people are just from prep and just in different cases, like they either have to have the whole thing, like all these different things at once, or none of it. And I think that this is going to help them a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something that kind of like leads into like the feminine aspect, which has been really fun for me personally to like integrate, and then also to learn how to coach as a coach and other people. Because if we talk about the feminine, it is, like I said, it can be very like light and, you know, fun and playful, but it can also be very scary and destructive, and it can be a whole lot. And if you can't like contain it, it's like, oh. But integrating that into fitness, maybe if you are in your wounded feminine, which would be kind of what we see sometimes with, I would say mostly like beginners, is more of like a victim mentality. You know, like everything happens to me. I am not in control. Also like inauthenticity. So like doing things because you think other people should, or like not speaking your truth, not actually doing what you want to do, just kind of like going with the flow of things and not like speaking up for yourself. I was going somewhere with that. Crap.
The wounded feminine.
Yeah. So like when you go to integrate that, and if you have pushed it away like so much that you're just like, no feminine for me. Like I'm a hardcore person. I don't have this in me. Finding that in fitness is actually really fun because it is a lot of embodiment. Like it is a lot of like sensuality. So like all of your senses, like feeling into things. And if you like train to a certain point, like I kind of said on the last podcast, like if you dissociate yourself from training, you just like have it separate from you and you don't experience the sensations within your training, then bringing that back is like a whole new world. Because sometimes it's like a lot. You're like, crap, I didn't realize I was training this hard. My body is fighting against me this much. And then you can also kind of like feel into it and be like, oh, like training actually feels really, really good now. Like my body loves this. Like my muscles love to contract like this. They love to like stretch. They love to like be in these like different stretches and positions and exercises and movements. And it can be like a really nice place, but it can also be very like, I don't know what to do. You know, it's like, I know how to train like this. I don't know what you mean by like stretch into the movement more. Like, what do you mean I need to feel into like my muscles and like try out different positions? Like, I just want you to tell me what to do.
Very rigid.
Yeah.
Yep.
So exploring that in training for me, like I have been doing like a lot of like yoga lately. So like incorporating some of the yoga pieces into my training has been really interesting because it's like one of the concepts of yoga is like when you get into a pose, you don't let that pose be like the fullest expression right off the bat. You don't just like, like folds completely over and you're like, okay, like this is, my muscles are ready now. It's like, oh, you kind of like relax into it. So like with some of my training, it's like, oh, like maybe not every single rep needs to look exactly the same. What if like it could be better? Like what if my next rep could be like a little bit deeper, a little bit more range of motion? What if like, oh, I start to notice that this in my hip doesn't actually feel super great and I just move it a little bit, instead of being like, it has to look this way. Like they all have to be identical. It's like a really curious way of training. But sometimes you don't know how it's going to go. So I think that there's a lot of like control issues, which is where we see like the masculine come up again.
I feel like, not that you are, but I feel like low key called out because I feel like I've had a lot of pressure on myself to make every rep look perfect. I'm like, I have to like perform this rep exactly right every single time.
Well, like what is perfect? What is the perfect rep? I can show you like all of the videos of like biomechanics and everything like that and be like, yeah, this is how this is supposed to look. But like sometimes like my cues don't work on my athletes. Like sometimes like, oh, like this should be textbook for you. And they're like, I don't feel it. Yeah. It doesn't feel nice for me. I was like, okay.
It's like textbook form, textbook rep, but they're like, yeah, I don't feel my hamstrings at all. It's like, oh, okay.
And I know that that's also like a concept. It's like, oh, I don't care how your muscles feel during training. It's like, well, I do. Like I really, it's like, there's not like room for like emotions or feelings in training. And like, I think that's completely not true. There's a lot of power to be found there.
I will say though, do you feel like sometimes people feed too much into what they feel during their training to where it's almost, what's the word I'm looking for?
Holding them back.
Holding them back.
Debilitating?
Basically.
Yeah.
It's
In a way?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if something like that comes up, it probably just means that like something needs to be looked at. I don't think, I think it's a little bit difficult. So I'll just use an example of my own. It's like there was a couple times when I was training the way that I said previously where I was just like really burning the candle at both ends. And I like did a set of RDLs that day and I got like one less rep than last week. Temper tantrum. I like lost my crap. And it's like I just had like a full like breakdown. Like I started like crying and like anger. I threw my belt. It was like a whole mess. And people were around, so that was embarrassing. So it's like if something like that comes up, it's like, oh, we're actually onto something. Like this actually needs attention. So I can either take 10 minutes of my lift and I can look at this, I can figure out what's going on in me and then like use it as fuel. It doesn't need to be debilitating. And I think that's where some of these pieces come in because it's like when the emotions consume you like that, you have two options. You can stay identified with it. You can continue to say like, this is me. I am this emotion. I am anger. I am angry. Or you can be like, this is something that is arising in response to this one situation that I'm having right now. Why is that? Like, what's happening in me? And, for me, it's like my need to be perfect in this example. It's like, oh, I need to be perfect. My coach expected me to get 1+ and I got 1-. Like, this is unacceptable behavior of me. And then it's like, okay, like, why did the anger come up then? And it's like, oh, I'm angry at myself. Why is that? Like, oh, I feel like I need to be a perfectionist. And then you just keep going, why, what's happening? And then you get deeper than you thought that you could. And now you have like a whole new perspective on yourself. And you're like, oh, this actually shows up. And this is actually an issue everywhere, not just in the gym. Yeah. So I think that like, if things like that do come up and things like that are debilitating to an extent, like, taking a 10-minute rest period isn't going to be the end of the world for it. But I think it just needs some guidance in that sense. Because if people have these things and they're being told, I shouldn't feel this way, I shouldn't have this come up, I need to be this hardcore athlete, I need to like not let these things get to me, then that's just like shame. It brings up like anxiety. It's like, oh, I can't be this way, so I need to be different. But it's like, but you are this way. This is common. This is something that you are experiencing. So then being able to explore that in a way and like having someone who is receptive as a coach as well, that they can talk to and be like, hey, your emotions are allowed here. You're accepted. Like whatever comes up, like that's why you hired me. That's what I'm here for. So I think that it needs a certain level of grace. It needs a certain level of courage. You need to be like courageous to look at it, especially if some of these things, like I'm sure that a lot of people come to bodybuilding or fitness as an escape mechanism. We hear it all the time, like gym is therapy, and it's like, it can be therapeutic, perhaps, but maybe not as a complete substitute.
Gym is not therapy. Go to therapy.
So yeah, just taking the time, having the courage to look into these things, and then just having someone who isn't going to shame you. I think that's the biggest thing that I've been trying to get away from is like having this idea of how things need to be instead of like going with how they are.
Yeah. I like that.
Just being like ultimately more understanding. And so I've had like similar conversations with my athletes, and I want to know if like you've had this, but like they bring up things like this, and so you try to help them dig a little bit deeper, but they're so like they're almost guarded to it, to where they don't want to open up and they don't want to think deeper. Are there any tools that you use to maybe help them, or do you just kind of allow them, accept it, and then when it comes up again, we're like, okay, this is a pattern? Because I've done that, but I feel like there's sometimes this push and this pull where it's like, I don't know how hard to push them in that moment, have them dig deeper, because at the end of the day, someone has to want to reflect and dig deep for it to actually work.
Yeah, so I would say the best thing that like you not the best thing, the most proactive thing that can be done in those situations is like one, trust, like really like being like making sure that they trust that you will not respond in a way that maybe they're responding to themselves in their head is the first and foremost things. So I think like leading from compassion, even though like of course like we have a job to do, we need to get them the results that they want, but at the same time being understanding and saying like, you know, on the hard days, that's when I'm here for you most, and like I will never shame you for it, I will never judge you for what's going on in you, like I just want to help. So making sure that trust is there so the communication can flow is the most important piece. And then the other thing that I started doing with my athletes is I actually just made a journal a couple months ago, which has like a lot of the questions that I ask my own athletes in my own like coaching container, just kind of like written down. There's like almost like 200 questions in there. There's things on like masculine and feminine. There's things on judgments. There's things on comparisons, on body image, all of these pieces that usually are like the big pieces that people struggle with in fitness. So kind of like prompting them in advance and being like, hey, like I would love for you to do like 1 of these a week, 1 to 2 of these a week, you know, as many as feel called to, or you can just jump around. Not saying like my journal needs to be like the one thing, like it is free if anyone would like it. But just having,
I highly recommend it.
I love that.
Thank you.
That is so
yeah, just having like the, I guess like foundation laid previously where they start to ask themselves questions, because it is more of like a habit that they get into instead of like, because if you're always in a habit of like, I feel this way or this comes up, repress.
So I am, or no,
and then like that's the cycle. We need to break that at some point, or it becomes like so bad that there is like a burnout, and then then they have to start doing it that way, which hopefully we can avoid with like conversations like this. But yeah, that's like the best thing that you can do, I think. But it sounds like you're doing everything right, trying to be open to them and just like receptive. So like, thank you for
every single time I'm on a phone call with my athletes, I'm like, I'm here for you, whatever you need. Like, I hope you know that through our entire journey together. Like, you need to call me. Like, I will drop my day. So I always want them to know that. So
we need more of you. Thank you for doing that.
I love my people.
I think you do a great job of that, because your people ride for you. Like I just see it on their Instagram, social media, even the messages that you get, the messages that I get from my athletes about how you've impacted them through the podcast too. It's huge. You do a really great job of like holding space and letting your athletes know that it's there for them.
And even your messages like through Instagram, like all of that. I agree. Same thing. Like you have a.
Thank you guys.
You have a good welcome sign.
Welcome.
Yeah. Come talk to me, please.
It's a healthy masculine.
Yes.
By the way.
We love it. We love it.
I am the home.
You are that for me, dude. So many times.
Yeah.
That is true.
You.
When I was a toxic masculine, what's the real word?
I was just saying wounded.
Wounded. Sorry.
I know.
When I was a wounded masculine.
Crippled masculine.
So sorry. When I was a wounded one, This was the healthy masculine. And it was super cool because like you taught me how to be a healthy masculine in a healthy way.
Yeah.
I think that's also kind of like a big thing in the coaching space is like I've seen a lot of like what I would like, I guess, label as like wounded masculine energy. And it's like if we are in like a patriarchal society, not saying like men are bad, just like that is like the way that it is framed. And there is a decent amount of like wounded masculinity going on in that container, then a lot of people don't know what like a healthy masculine looks like. So if there's like a lot of coaches that are also in their wounded masculine and that's all that anyone ever knows, then like of course they're going to be drawn to those types of people. Of course that's what they're going to be looking for in their coaching containers because it validates the way of living that they already have. So that kind of perpetuates this cycle, and it's also like society and the culture, I guess, that we have. And it's like, I love bodybuilding. Like, I love the sport. I love the people in it. But I also just like, it hurts me. You know, it hurts to see everyone like kind of like, you know, at some point they burn out. Like my favorite people to follow, they like burn out, they fall off. There's like, you know, the 4 weeks where they don't post anything. And then like they post this thing. It's like, oh, I've been like going through like a lot of stuff and I'm really like struggling, but like, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's like, is it?
But I'm
Yeah.
good.
A little Band-Aid post.
It's
like,
just-
everything's fine.
It's just so common.
It is.
Yeah. Well, so I almost don't want to ask, but I do because maybe it could be helpful. Because we had a conversation earlier today where you said you noticed that I operate sometimes possibly out of the wounded masculine. So if I'm calling myself out, I want to know, like, what have you noticed in me in the time that we spent together? And
Yeah.
you can go all, like, the podcast, like,
Yeah.
these listeners, these are our family.
Yeah.
Like, we're
Yeah,
with
we're all
family. Like,
family.
I feel very safe, and that's why I want to ask. I'm
Yeah.
like, what have you noticed me operating in? And like, what gives you the impression that I'm in wounded masculine? And how can I like save myself, essentially, shift out
Yeah.
of that?
I think for me, a lot of what I've noticed in you is this dissociation, or in like the kindest way possible. It's you know, like everything, you know, we have to leave at 11. We got this thing going on.
Yes.
You're like cooking and like kind of like on your phone and just like eating, and then you go to your office and just like, you know, like go and like not really like being present for anything. I also notice you apologize to me a lot for things that don't need to be apologized for per se. Like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm like, you know, like cooking, or like, I'm sorry I'm not like paying attention to you, or I'm sorry that like this thing happens. And it's like, I'm cool. Like, I'm just chilling. Like, we can like go whenever. And that's not necessarily like a bad thing. Like, I appreciate you being conscientious of like my experience as well. Like, I really appreciate that. But at the same time, it's
Like being so rigid or like tied to my routine, but then also
yeah. And if you're like
like
apologizing,
wanting to control.
yeah, if you're like apologizing to me, it's like, what made you say like you had to apologize? Like, what happened in your head? It's like, oh, this probably didn't look good, or like this probably shouldn't have happened this way, or whatever else.
The critic wasn't speaking for
Oh.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see.
and then from
I
like
see that, yeah.
the feminine perspective, if we're also using this example as well, if you are in that wounded masculine, like your feminine wants to hide, doesn't feel safe. It's like, okay, like I don't have space. There's not a container for me. Like, where am I supposed to go? You know, it's like, if there's no water bottle, where's the water supposed to go? On the floor? I don't think so. No.
It's evaporating.
So at that point too, it's like, okay, so like you're not really like sitting there enjoying your food, for example. You're not really like feeling yourself during training. It's just kind of like, oh, just like checking boxes, or like, oh, I don't really like notice my glutes anymore, but like I'm just going to try this new cue, for example. I'm just like really calling you out. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Please do. Please do.
So it's like usually if you have like one wounded piece, the other one kind of like hides away.
They work in.
Yeah. So
tandem.
it's if it's like you have like a wounded feminine, for example, and you're like in this victim mentality, then you do not have a masculine to hold you responsible and accountable for your situations. So it's like usually there's a mixing and mingling of things that need to happen in that sense to kind of like bring them out into a healthy way. And it is a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I'll be honest. It's a lot of presence. It's a lot of like calling yourself out on these pieces. But it is ultimately like once you start integrating these pieces, like I do find like you are more successful. Like for me, when I started like integrating these, I can just say like from my own experience, I lost like 15 pounds without trying. You know, it's like I wasn't training to failure anymore. I was like lifting differently, feeling my muscles differently. My like skin got better. Everything started just like moving in the right direction without so much like forcing and effort. And it's like, and not trying to get it, you get it in some ways. I'm not saying that like you need to have like no structure, no protocol, anything like that. But at the same time, it's like if you give these pieces spaces to breathe, like if you feed them properly, they will serve you, because ultimately like your body and you want the same thing. You know, like why wouldn't you?
It almost
So-
comes down. Oh, sorry, Dee.
No, you go ahead.
So it almost comes. Oh,
Okay. I have an example. That's all I was saying. You go ahead, because I could keep.
I was going to say it basically comes down to like kind of loving the journey, following that, and like enjoying the work that you're putting in almost.
Yeah, it's a constant evolution. Always.
Okay, so I was gonna say, hopefully I remember it, to be honest. Kind of like reverse diet or dieting in general. For like, and I'm gonna compare it to this. Everyone thinks you have to, in order to lose weight, you have to continually drop your calories. Sometimes you have to build up your calories, and that's how you're gonna see your body transform and just recomp for your goal that you want. And so there's not always like a one way to do everything.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of similar to what you were saying.
Yeah, it's a great example. I hope that resonates with people because I understand. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. That was my example.
I like it. Good job.
Thank you. Dude, that's cool though. I like that you kind of went in because that's I wish I had like someone that followed me around just for a day and told me like, hey, it takes an outside perspective to
It does.
Yeah.
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 It really does. And I think on some level, like I am conscious of that,
Mhm.
but I have not done the necessary work and I want to.
Mhm.
So that is something that
I think
would like to do.
Yeah. If there's also kind of like an echo chamber and you're like around the same types of people who have the same types of experiences and like ways of thinking and you just kind of like surround yourself with that. It's not like a bad thing, but sometimes when you like have a different presence around and you notice the differences, like relationships are mirrors, it's like if something that I do like doesn't sit well with you, it's like, why is that? It's like we only know each other through relationship. So it's like you can kind of have the space to be like, oh, something is different about this person. Like, what is that? Like, I know for me, like I had some friends who, when I was like in my like go, like wounded masculine, they would like sit with me and I would be super uncomfortable. It's like, why are we sitting? Why are we just sitting?
We're just sitting here.
What's the goal? What are we accomplishing here? And they're like, oh, I don't know, just enjoying your company. And it's like, oh,
fuck. I'm so sorry. I felt like that's what you felt during your prep.
No, okay. No, for sure. I want to stop that girl. But no, I definitely feel that way. But I was going to touch on something in the mix of everything. Yes, I used to be that way. And now that I understand that, dude, my routine doesn't have to be the same way every day. And I'm still going to accomplish my goal. And it's okay if like if things are out of order. Like same thing for you. Like you're going to still have your pro debut and still crush it even if your every day is not exactly perfect. That's just like, you can handle that. You can take on a task or a day of it being not the same.
Yeah.
And like, same thing for me. If there's ever a point that I'm back who I was before, like I know you're gonna call me out. I'm so sorry.
No, I just thought it was funny.
That was hilarious. I didn't see that coming, and I was like, oh.
I just thought it was funny because I was like, ooh, this is relatable.
No, yeah, but it happened. It was for so long.
Yeah,
it was like a whole year.
Yeah.
I think it is very relatable, like in the bodybuilding space for us, for sure. Yeah. And like stepping away from, I haven't stepped away from bodybuilding, but stepping away from the stage, I feel like I was moving towards balance maybe, but then we started my pro debut prep, which I'm so excited for and I love, but I did feel the shift where it was like, I have to do cardio at this time. I have to pose at this time. I have to walk Murphy at this time. And then I journal. I can't journal before I walk Murphy. Like but that control is like ruining me.
That's gonna hold you back from your goal even more.
Look at Alyssa, who was just on the pod. Her day, every single day for her is different and she still crushes it. So like, I think that should show you like, not every day has to be the same. Yeah. And, like you will get it done no matter what.
And like if you journaling not at this time and doing it before or doing it at a different time 3 days out of the week, every week just for some reason, that's not going to be a reason why you don't place better. Like that's not.
I didn't journal at 7 a.m. that one day.
I used to have this really toxic trait where I used to be like, if I don't do this thing, then this thing, like what I want won't happen. And so I would purposefully do something, not because I wanted to or because I knew it was what was best for me, but it was because of the fear of not being able to achieve that one thing. And so having to like rework and reframe that, a lot of work.
Yeah.
But it makes life a lot better and it's worth it.
Yeah.
I can just like speak like Noah, like you're very devoted, like you're very dedicated to everything that you do. And it's like, I don't think you need to like control that. I think it's just like your natural being. It's like you care for your dog. So of course you're going to take them for a walk. Like you care about your clients. Of course you're going to get back to them. Of course, like you have your other job that you have responsibilities for. Like it's all going to get done. Like whether or not like you control that and like strictly like think about it, I don't think is going to make a difference for you because you already have that trust built up. You know that you can be dedicated. You know you can turn it on when you need to. So it's like, whenever that situation arises, like it will, and it will just happen that way. And I think one thing that's been really helpful for me, because again, like I used to be just like you, I used to have 3 jobs plus college and it was like plus training and everything. And it was crazy for me. But now it's like when I have like a to-do list, it's like I'll just have that to-do list, and then everything will get done that day, whether or not like I started at 8 p.m. or I started right when I wake up. Because it's like, if you sit long enough, you're going to want to go do something. It's like if you stay in bed all day, like eventually your bed's not comfortable and you want to get up and do something else. So eventually like something will arise in you to make you want to go do the things that you laid out that you want to do. And if that feeling doesn't arise, well, like, why is that? Is that actually something that you want? Like those are the questions that come up.
Constantly reassessing.
Yeah. I like that a lot. Yeah.
That's the biggest thing I think for me is like, if I notice that like, maybe like a client's falling off with something or they're really struggling with something, it's like, okay, like I know that you want this goal. Like I know that you've told me this is something that you want, but we're struggling with this one piece. Like, why is that? Like, why are you struggling to get your cardio done? Like, oh, like I don't like this methodology that we're doing. Okay, great. Let's change that then. Let's make it enjoyable for you where that's like a natural occurring. Like, oh, I want to go do my cardio now.
Coaching is a democracy.
I like that.
Like it's something that where both people, you come together and you're a team and you both work together. And I think that a lot of people view coaching as like, is it tyranny?
Yeah.
Where it's like, I tell you what to do and that's it. But like, I think so many, like, you can get so much more out of your athletes if you work with them.
Exactly. Yeah. Like
you're
when
a team, you're a duo for a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I started like doing that with the to-do list, like letting things like come up like, oh, I could really feel like writing this paper now or something. I actually noticed I was more efficient. I was more productive with it instead of it taking like an hour and a half of me like forcing, like, I don't feel it right now, but I got to do it right now for some unknown reason. Now it's like, oh, I really want to do this right now. And it just flows out of me. It's like creative energy, like the feminine in that sense.
It's like having purpose or making it count versus just going through the motions.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's super helpful.
This is very helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like this a lot.
Yeah, that was super nice. A nice brain recharge.
Yeah.
Just think about things a little differently.
Yeah, just a different way of like thinking about it, and hopefully it like resonates with some people. It's like obviously we still need a level of structure, which is like healthy masculine, and then we should also still be enjoying what we're doing, which is like the feminine. Like you enjoy something when you have a pleasant sensation, which is very like feminine is very like feeling focused. So it's like we need a balance of these, and if you like get a little unbalanced in them, then over time that eventually like compounds, and then things usually like hit the fan in some way. Like usually it's like burnout is what I see.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
That was a lot of learning. Thank you.
Where can people buy your journal? Is it like on your Instagram?
Yeah, it's actually free. So they can just like message me and I will send it over to them. It's like 200 pages.
Awesome. Wow.
Like all the questions.
You're amazing.
Yeah, yeah, you're about to get a lot of people. You're going to get me. Me DMing you.
Yes, please do.
Yeah.
Please do.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It is a very well put together, well thought out, like organized. It flows. I need to print it because it's on my phone,
Thank you.
but I love it.
I'm so glad. Yeah, I would love for this to be a little bit more like digestible for people, because I notice like for myself at least, like when I like post about these things or whatever else, I have gotten like a decent amount of pushback from people that maybe like don't see it that way just yet. And it's like, like I've thought through this, like this is like my opinion. Like I'm open to change for sure, but I think that it's like not always the most digestible piece. It's like, what do you mean I need to be less rigid? Like this is bodybuilding, And it's like, I understand that at the same time, there can be both and there can be balance and ways to enjoy what we're doing. And if people are no longer enjoying it, then like, that's a big red flag.
Then why, I always ask my athletes, if you don't enjoy it, then why are you doing it?
Yeah.
Like, how can we make you enjoy it again? Or like, maybe we need to reassess the goal.
Yeah. What's the motive?
Yeah.
Like, what are we clinging to?
Yeah.
If it's more of a job, then you're not going to give all your effort into anything that's you don't find happiness in.
Yeah. I really think that's how you can spot the good coaches versus like the ones that are just doing it for a paycheck. You can spot the genuine coaches who want to work with you as a person versus somebody who just wants to give you a plan and be like, do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give me my money.
I will say that like this style of coaching is like, it's a learning curve for me, because I've never learned how to teach someone, I guess, to like feel into their own body. It's like, oh, we have these cues so they can help feel based on like what I feel. And it's like, no, like what do you think? Like some of the cues is like, go play around with this movement. Like come back when you find something that works. And it's like it's very difficult to coach that way, because like sometimes like everything changes very quickly. It's like, actually, like I am not enjoying what I'm doing. It's like, okay, we got to rearrange everything. But I can say that it is like very fruitful with my girls as of late. So
Yeah, for sure. the day old question. I feel like my athletes hate it when I ask them this. How did this movement feel?
Yeah.
And when I get a response that said good, I'm like, can you please elaborate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, I know that like a lot of people are like, don't write me novels. Like obviously like don't write about things that aren't like relevant, but it's like I care about your experience.
More than a good. Give me something.
Give me you something. Feel your lats really good, but you're like feeling a little bit of your delt. Like give me a little bit more information, you know?
I can say that can be, sorry.
No, you're good.
That can be like a little overwhelming for some people, I've noticed, especially like for me, I noticed like when people used to ask me like, how do you feel? Like I would almost like freeze up. It's like, what do you mean? How do I feel? Like, I don't know. Like I have
don't
no
ask
idea.
Me that question.
Just like, tell me what to do. Like, I don't want to think about it. And then that's like, it's also like a learning thing. It's like sometimes giving examples of how that could feel. That's also like a nice thing about if you do get to train in person is you can like, you know, like ask them in real time and maybe like guide the process a little bit more instead of like a retroactively like asking like, oh, how did this go? Because if a lot of people aren't in their feminine, for example, they're not connected to their bodies. They don't know what's going on. So it's like, I guess I felt good. Like I wasn't like dying. So, or like nothing broke. So it should be good, right?
Yeah. That's when we ask the clarifying questions.
Yeah.
Dig a little deeper.
I feel like, for me, like it's all been like asking the right questions, like learning how to rephrase things. Like some of my girls have completely different like check-in forms, for example, because like some of them don't know how to answer things unless it's 100% like super direct. So like one of my girls has like 40 questions or something. You're like crazy, like an extra 10 questions because she wouldn't like answer anything. So it's a lot of like give and take, a lot of push and pull, a lot of extra work, to be honest. But it's worth it.
But yes, it is.
That's where the real change happens.
Yeah.
And not just physique.
Yeah.
Like life changes.
Yeah.
That's what we want to see at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Is there anything that you want to speak about before we wrap up?
No, I think that was perfect. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I love that.
Me too.
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
So happy
we really
to.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Tell everyone your Instagram so that they can go follow you.
Yeah, it's at Alexa Rukstela. So I feel like that's intuitive, maybe.
We'll put it.
I think it'll be on the little screen. Make
Yeah.
sure you're watching on YouTube. I know you guys want to see our faces.
Yes,
so make sure you're doing
Sometimes
this
we
on
hit
YouTube.
up some
Okay,
bicep flexes.
See, you want to see us flex? Yeah,
Oh my God.
every one of you that's not on YouTube is missing out right now.
Yeah, my hands a lot, so you're missing everything.
Yeah. Especially because there's so many like facial expressions.
Yes.
Like the freaking look over here. I was like, oh. It's like, why is everyone quiet?
Because Cecily's staring at me.
Staring into my soul.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you being here.
Appreciate you back.
Thank you guys for listening. I hope you feel more relentless than when you came, and we will see you next week.
Cha-ching.
Bye.
All loves.
I hope y'all really enjoyed the podcast today, leaving it feeling more relentless than ever. But we have a few things that we would love to ask of you, so I'm going to give this over to Noah.
Thank you guys so much for listening. If you could, I know that this is your new favorite podcast. Please leave a 5-star rating and review. Leave any comments and questions below. And make sure that you're sharing across social media so that all of your friends get to listen to the greatest podcast on earth.
And if you have any questions about any topics that we talk about or anything at all, fitness, competing related, anything, we'll hit you back up, Instagram or in the podcast under, if the comment box is there, then we will definitely answer your questions and help you out as best as we can.
Absolutely. So leave those 5-star reviews. Let us know, and we'll talk to y'all again soon.
Have a relentless day.
Bye.